Our moderator for our next panel will be Jin, and she'll be speaking to us about Asian love. Thank you so much, Jin.
So good morning. Welcome everybody to our final panel at NDC's Town Hall. I want to share a short story that I experienced coming here to DC. I was getting on the airplane and they were handing out stickers, and I asked a flight attendant, what is it for? I mean, I can put it on, but I want to know why. And so she was saying, we have a captain that's flying this airplane to Atlanta, and he is retiring today, and that was his last flight as a commercial air captain. So I said that, well, that's awesome. So I took a sticker, I put it on my left shoulder here, and then we all walked in, settled down, put our baggages away, and then the captain started speaking about his gratitude, his tenure, and how wonderfully it feels to retire from a company that he has trusted for many years. And whether I knew this person sitting next to me or not, we all together clapped and was happy for him. And that moment I thought to myself, you don't really need to know the names of anyone or to know their background or story, but if there is something to celebrate, we unite and we celebrate together. And so I was really happy about that. But as we all know, May is the Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And all of us here, we have experienced pandemic, whether positive, negative. For me personally, it was awesome to see family come together. But I also know that some of us lost family members, lost opportunities, jobs, income. And then we had a huge social movement happen and go through this nation. For us Asians, when we experience the anti-hate Asian crimes, which has already been 2 years, and we're not just talking about she offended me with racial slurs or that sort, but crime happened in Atlanta. And when that happened, we started noticing that these type of crimes were already existent. It just was not publicized enough. And ever since, both Faith and myself have been adamant in collecting news articles, any kind of publication that has to do with anti-hate Asian crimes. And lo and behold, every day there is something in the newspaper. And so today's last panel, we want to uplift these issues that are obviously prevalent but have not been acted upon assertively for the Asian American communities. And we want to welcome everybody here, of course, to listen in on what we have to say. But we have very special guests, panel speakers that will touch upon some of the key challenges that we face as Asian American communities. And before I do that, let me introduce myself. I'm Jin Sung. I'm the board chairman for National Diversity Coalition, and we've been advocating for equity and justice for all minorities, by the way, all minorities, African American, Hispanic American, and of course Asian American. But never has it been so important for us to raise this issue that has not been addressed properly, whether it's federal, state, or municipality, or even at the corporate branding level. We feel that this is a time, and we have to not only start speaking, but addressing it in a proactive manner. So I'd love to welcome our panelists. We have Jennifer Kim from SBA. She's the Associate Administrator. If she can please join me here in the front. We also have Shin Koyamada. He's an actor and also the CEO of Koyamada International Foundation. Please join me in the front. And we have Claudette Fernandez. He's a Director of Program and Equity and Opportunity Strategy of USDA. Thank you. And we also have Peter Nguyen who is the national president of the Federal Asian Pacific Coalition. Welcome, Peter. And I do believe Susan Allen is going to be joining us from USPAACC. She's a CEO. But while she's getting there, maybe I'm going to take her. Welcome, everybody. I'd love to, rather than me rambling on with your incredible bios, I'd love to have you speak on your background. And I think this conversation is more than your current career. I know we have federal employees here. We also have community leaders. What's important is that all of us, there's something similar. And our commonality is that our origin is from Asia, right? And what does that bring to your work, your passion? How does that make your statements even more powerful as a corporate federal employee and also as a community leader?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. First, maraming salamat, and sincere thank you to everybody for inviting me to be a part of this panel. My name is Claudette Fernandez. I'm Filipino-American. I work for the Department of Agriculture. I grew up in Manila, Philippines. I grew up poor, and, every step of the way, there were a lot of adults around me who have taken the time and energy to make sure that I didn't go and made bad decisions. And I think it's that community collective culture that we have in the Philippines that enabled me to survive and thrive. And it just so happened that life gives you blessings. And, I had an opportunity to immigrate in the United States. And that blessing, I never took advantage of it. I mean, I never took it for granted, I meant. And so every step of the way, I tried to just pay it forward. This country has given me the dream that I never thought I would be able to achieve. And so that spirit of service and being able to pay it forward is something that I've always espoused and lived. And the ability to also share that blessing to others is essentially what drove me to work for the federal government.
Well, hopefully people aren't sick of hearing from me. So I'll just share, I think, a couple of stories that I kind of carry with me at the Small Business Administration in my role now. I very vividly remember, I think it was March 11th of 2020. I was eating lunch in K-Town, Manhattan, peak lunchtime on a weekday, 32nd Street, at a restaurant that normally has a wait. And I went to meet my friend there for lunch, and it was only us and one other table there. And it was before any, lockdown had been announced. It was actually later that day that I remember the mayor announced that Broadway was shutting down. But, it kind of hadn't officially happened yet. And I kind of looked around and I thought, this is maybe going to be a problem, right? It was the small businesses, the Asian American small businesses that I think felt the impact first and felt it very deeply, right? The kind of double hit of the pandemic itself and the kind of racism that came with it and discrimination. And, when I took this job at the SBA, I kind of thought a lot about the small businesses that helped shape my life as I grew up. I grew up in Michigan, in not a very diverse town, small town Michigan, and, it was the kind of one or two kind of brave Korean American small business owners that helped kept kind of my culture alive as I grew up in a very white town. And, you even had to drive an hour to get to the closest Korean restaurant, but there was like the one Korean restaurant, the one grocery store, the one thing, and you kind of, everybody relied on each other. And I think back to none of those business owners were, connected to the SBA. They asked each other for help, right? We always kind of looked to each other for advice and guidance. So maybe if just one of them had known about the SBA programs, like how much they could have brought to the rest of the community, how maybe much more could we have, thrived, then. And so, again, in taking this job, I think a lot about that and how we can reach people that are not already kind of, are already in these kind of structures. So.
Hi, my name is Shinko Yamada. Good to see you all. Good to be back in DC. In the past 2 days, it's nice to get to know Jean and the rest of the team, Faith. I am originally from Japan, moved to the United States about 22 years ago to Los Angeles to pursue my American dream in Hollywood. So I was in the movie co-star with Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai. I'm on Disney Plus now. Wendy Wu Homecoming Warrior was one of my movie. My wife and I started a production company in 2005. I was only 23 years old. This young Japanese immigrant starting a company in LA. An international consulting company in 2007, and we run Koyamada International Foundation, KIF, international NGO with 8 national chapters in 8 different countries. Our partners are UN agencies and international NGOs. Yesterday, actually, I was appointed by the Mongolia's foreign minister to represent government of Mongolia as its culture envoy globally. So, ambassador couldn't make it today, but I have different hats everywhere. I travel Africa, South America, Asia, but I'm proud to be Asian and now Asian American as a U.S. citizen. So I'm very fortunate to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Jin.
So good morning, everyone. So I guess first, and I'm trying to beat the movie star here. I didn't know that. I'm actually get to sit next to a movie star, and I did watch all his movies. Excellent movies. So yeah, my background is pretty much like similar to Jen and others. I immigrated here back in 1975. As an Asian American, or more so Vietnamese American, because of the war. So of course we landed in a tiny little town in Oklahoma, and 40 years ago we probably the only Asian family for the next 20 years or so, and it's a new thing for them. So of course now, like most of you, we went through all those positive and negative parts. So since then, of course, now I'm the national president of FAPAC, Federal Asian Pacific Coalition, which is basically represent all Federal Asian employees, concentrate on Asian Pacific, and Native Hawaiian American, and Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, with the Department of Defense and DC government. And our focus, we are nonprofit, our focus is about education and about leadership, with the emphasis on diversity, equity, and equality. What I'm going to try to do during the panel is that I'm going to try to stay on the positive side of the Asian love, and that's the theme of our town hall. But also, I'm going to tie the importance of the relationship between, as a nonprofit, FAPAC, but also I wear the other hat. I'm also a government employee, specifically for the Department of Transportation and Federal Aviation Administration for the last 30 years or so at the management level, where I'm going to tie how important it is to kind of have that seat at the table, especially during the last panel we're discussing about small business and the issue that we're all having, whether you have a business or you even just a typical employee, a federal employee, try to get to the top, break the so-called bamboo ceiling or glass ceiling. So we're going to talk more about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I just noticed our 5th panelist just entered the door. We'd like to welcome Susan Allen to the front. And I'm going to request maybe the host to please bring me another chair so I can join our panelists on the side. Oh, see how polite we are? Awesome. Oh, thank you. Susan, we're just doing introductions. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, wow. How much time do you have? Susan L. Allen. Faith, good to see you. I heard your story, so let's just give you the 2-minute spin. Born in China, never lived there, traveled to China a lot, grew up in Hong Kong, saw how Hong Kong was returned to mainland China in 1997. My husband and I were there, and how Hong Kong had lost its freedom year by year and now day by day. I came here after high school, on a White House invitation for my volunteer work for people with disabilities in Hong Kong, people who were amputees, blind, all that. So I came here, have my college education, have my law degrees, and practice law, immigration and international law when it was very rare. It's not as popular. This is like popcorn right now, immigration law, peanuts. But when I practiced with my husband, it was a very sophisticated, not that it's not now, but it's very messy immigration law now. So, 15 years ago, I accidentally won some cases against the federal government for not applying the law to the immigrants who are entitled to come to the United States. I won 3 cases with attorney fees, 6 figures. I told my husband, money's in the bank. I'm going to take a sabbatical. And then I went home. Got bored. So went to the U.S. Pan Asian American Chamber of Commerce and volunteered, never left. I have been its full-time paid president for 15 years. I love it. I should have started it after I got my law degree, but had I not practiced law and advocated for my clients and fought the government, when the law was on their side, the facts were on their side, I would not have been as bold as I have been as the national president and CEO of the U.S. Pan Asian American Chamber of Commerce, which is headquartered here in Washington, D.C. We have a small staff of 15, small group of 1099 independent contractors of 10 in Washington, D.C. have 5 chapters in the critical states where Asian Americans have large numbers in population and business formation, California, North and Southern, Texas, Georgia, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, and the Washington, D.C. area. Covered the waterfront. We're very happy, and because of all the work we've done, we have boots on the ground. We don't just talk, we actually practice what we preach. I am a people person. I may dress like you can't reach me, but I will pick up a piece of paper on the floor in my office, and I tell, if I can stoop down and pick up a piece of dirt, you could do it. That's what I do. So last year, the Small Business Administration awarded us as one of 8 national Tier 1 grantees of a $100 million program to help small businesses which have been impacted by the pandemic. For us, as you all know, we have been the triple impacted economically, health and safety, and the anti-Asian sentiment that has spread across the country. I don't want to talk a lot about it because we don't want people to see me walking and say, here she comes, the victim candidate, right? The victim voice. So they gave us the $100 million for 8 national spokes and 43 smaller regional and state spokes. And our job is in the next 2 years to go across all 50 states plus Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia to help businesses which have been impacted and businesses which had never accessed or known about all the good services that the SBA provides to the American people. I also have been honored to be appointed as the Vice Chair of the Federal Communications Commission's Communication Equity and Diversity Council that is focused on, at least for me, the $42.25 billion of infrastructure, broadband deployment, reconstruction for the country, targeted towards underserved community. That means Asian, Black, Hispanic, Native American women, LGBTQ+, and rural areas. So I have a lot to share with you. That's why I asked how much time you have for me. But it's a great introduction. Thank you for having me talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Wow, I think she answered some of the questions I had for the panelists. I think it brings us to an even more important juncture where with all the expertise that we have here on this panel, and I know across America, we're diverse in professional background, the outcomes that we've delivered in the United States of America to be part of the fabric of America. But here we want to hear directly from our panelists. And Jennifer, I know you represent SBA, and Susan just brought up some great points. As you know, Asians, or the perception of Asians, there is a stereotype. When I walk in the door, I think, oh, Ivy League. Oh, she's rich. It is this kind of a stereotype Sometimes it plays to your favor. Majority of times, it doesn't. And so now we are dealing with this heavily influenced stereotype in our society as Asians. But then through the pandemic, we've learned that the small businesses especially have struggled a lot. And Susan just mentioned it. A lot of our businesses, whether it's a language barrier, whether it's a cultural barrier, or just flat-out ignorance, that they didn't know such program existed. I know that you've dealt with a lot of these questions from the small businesses owned by minorities. How did you deal with it through the pandemic, and perhaps even through partnerships like USPAACC, as Asians, are Asians counted in some of the planning phases of these type of programs that you did roll out? And because I got super excited when she mentioned Asians in that minority group, because I need the audience to know there are a lot of definitions where Asians are not included when it comes to underserved or minority. So my ears just perked up when you said that, and I think as from SBA, I think you have a clearer definition of what that means, but also from your perspective, how you dealt with this and how you were able to promote Asian businesses.
So, well, first, I'll just say personally, you mentioned, when you walk in the room, maybe there are some stereotypes. I think for me, probably like the aunties in the room don't think I'm 25, but a lot of people will just think I'm I don't know, like a junior staff person or younger, or they're like, oh, what high school do you go to? That doesn't happen as much these days, but it used to a lot. I would be well into my 20s or even 30, and people would think, oh, you must have just graduated from college, and I'm like, thank you, I know I look good. But, people underestimate me, I think, all the time, right? And I have the pleasure of serving with a number of other associate administrators. There are kind of different offices at the SBA, but I happen to oversee the Office of Field Operations, and that, again, means there's 10 regions, 68 offices, over 600 staff that all report to me. And not to brag, but just to say that, when I walk into a room, people don't usually think that I have that kind of responsibility. So that's something that I kind of personally have to deal with very regularly. On the SBA portion of the question, I'm so glad to have Susan here. She mentioned USPAACC is one of our, part of our community navigator program. She's kind of mentioning the hub and spoke model. So I don't know, imagine a wheel, I guess. But so we have our kind of hubs that are our grantees, and then they're working with other kind of smaller organizations locally, the spokes, again, to do that kind of outreach into communities and to folks that, we don't always have that access to. So I think the community navigators is a really big part of the kind of equity plan for the administrator and President Biden as well. Again, that money came through the American Rescue Plan. We also have launched a Council on Underserved Communities that we have a number of leaders on that help to kind of advise the SBA on, what we can do better, honestly, to reach underserved communities, including the AA and HPI community. In addition to that, we, are working with, so President Biden relaunched the White House initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. We're very lucky, actually, that Ben Raju, who's our district director in LA, he's actually co-chair of the regional network. So this is just another way that government is trying to work together to kind of honestly educate other federal agencies and federal government employees on the needs of the AAPI community. I think that's also, in your personal life, you kind of hear some things like, oh, Asians are not real minorities. They don't, they don't have the same impact. But I think there's still a fair amount of education to do. And so those regional networks are really great because they kind of bring together across federal agencies and help to, say you're SBA and you're like, oh, I'm trying to reach the Marshallese community in Arkansas, as an example, like what is there an agency out there that is already connected to them, right? So these regional networks are one way that we, another way that we can do that outreach. I will say, I think, under the leadership of Administrator Guzman, and President Biden, we are working to, I think this has been mentioned a few times today, have better data. I think also that helps us in our planning and outreach, just to even serve as a baseline for what have we done so far? How do we kind of, get even better data and more disaggregated data? Excuse me. So I think that is something that we are looking to make improvements upon under this administration, and know there's a commitment, again, kind of through these different structures, whether it's through community navigators or the White House Initiative, which has not the most attractive shorthand name, WIOMPI, if folks have heard that, but that's us. So I think there's a lot of great steps being taken. It's not lost on me, my responsibility as one of the more senior Asian American officials, in the agency, to continue to ask questions, what are we doing about this community, and to make sure we're included in those plans. But I do think Administrator Guzman has been very thoughtful about that, both in the Navigator program, the Council on Underserved Community, and it is, I think, trickling down through all our programs. The 8A program, which was also mentioned earlier today, is our kind of certification for folks, underserved businesses that can get access to federal contracts. That's also a big priority of the administrator, and we both are working to have the other federal agencies increase the amount of contracts that go to small businesses, and we're also working to certify more businesses in that program, and are also looking to do more specific outreach to the AA and HBI community to increase that number as well.
I'm very happy that we're part of that conversation. And you might be surprised why I'm emphasizing this so much, is because there are even books out there that referred Asian Americans as invisible community. And there's a reason for that, not only because we're not on TV screens as much as we should be, or be represented on corporate boardrooms, corporate leadership, or whichever organization that you are engaged with. I think it's pretty apparent that when we have issues, we're really quiet. We don't really complain. Maybe that's also a stereotype, but what's important is to now equalize and bring equity to these types of conversation. And to that respect, and thank you. I want to talk to Shin. And as we all know, he's a Hollywood star, right? He's an actor, and also there has been a lot of addressing that can be done through media. And in this particular issue of Asian race issues, if we were to educate people or correct some of the misunderstanding that's out there, do you feel that media or entertainment is a good platform for that effort?
Yes. Media, movies, shows, any entertainment content. I mean, as an actor, producer, my job is to send a good message. After the Disney and Warner Brothers movies, I got many offers to play stereotyped Asian character. I mean, you've probably seen some of the American movies that our Asians are playing. I refuse to play those, and because as an Asian American actor, we have a responsibility to send a good message about who we are and what type of message we're sending to. Because American movies go out internationally, so everyone will watch what we do, and it will stay forever. Even my kids and all of our grandkids will see all the movies one day. So that's what I try to do. And whenever we do a nonprofit charity activities through our foundation, we try to post on social media as much as we can and send messages and activities we do to the world. I think sending the message out what we do, that's what I do. So I'm a public figure for a long, long time, and people are listening to what I say, and I have to be careful what I say too. So I encourage Asian and Asian American to go out to their social media platforms or even their communities, join the local nonprofit organizations and communities to voice what they feel, what they believe in, what's right, what's wrong, to local elected officials, state and federal. We need to be more out there and express our feelings and thoughts, especially through media. Nowadays, we have a wonderful social media. Maybe it's too many social in the apps nowadays, but send in your thoughts and opinions through social media. I think that's the fastest and the most convenient way to engage different communities in the United States and the rest of the world.
Thank you for using your celebrity platform to really promote the Asian identity. National Diversity Coalition has a focus on really promoting, and all of us here, I'm sure you have journeyed through your career to see how difficult it has been for you to get where you are today. Some of us are national influencers, but what we see when you look at the landscape of education, corporations, media, or even just government space, we know that perhaps the equity is not quite there for Asian communities. And I want to pose this question to Claudette. As we all know that, some people think that Asians are fairly or overly represented in these corporate boardrooms or at leadership level, but that really is a myth. And so I wanted to hear from Claudette that, of course, here's a stats that says Asian Americans are severely underrepresented in these power positions, holding about 2.6% of the leadership positions, despite comprising of 6.8% of the population. In the day and age that we're living in right now, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just a good topic to talk about. We need to do something about it if it's not reflected in the realities that we live. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experiences in your journey, building your career, and at the level of influence that you are at right now. If this is true, what are you doing about it, and what can we as a community to promote diversity and inclusion for Asians?
Yes, absolutely. I don't know if this is working. It is working? Okay. Is it better if okay. Sure. Thank you for that question. All right. In the spirit of the motto of Asian love, okay, create a safe space for me here. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, we have to look internally first within our community, right? So I'm going to share three things here. The first thing is what's working and what's not working within our cultures, right? You said we are so widely diverse in AAPI. Disaggregated data is so important because every community in the AAPI community is diverse in of itself with varying experiences, varying conditions on what brought us to the United States. We know that for a fact. But the first issue there for me in my mind is our culture. We have individual cultures that sometimes unintentionally create barriers for ourselves. And I experienced it personally, firsthand, coming into the United States. I grew up being raised, and nothing against it, being respectful of the elderly, right? Bowing down and not looking people in the eye when you don't agree on something, and being respectful and as best as I can. And sometimes that respect is translated into not saying anything. And so in a competitive world, at least for me, from my perspective, in the government sector, in places where you're leading public services, where you can make such amazing community transformational changes, sometimes our culture doesn't encourage and doesn't empower the next generation to speak up. This month is not only AAPI month, it's also Mental Health Awareness Month. Shame and stigma is so inherently part of our culture. And so I wanted us to kind of take the time to reflect, what is it about our individual cultures and practices and traditions that may or may not lend for people to be competitive in some leadership positions. That's one. It's like tough love on ourselves, right? Like just honest reflection of who we are and what is it about our culture that may or may not lend for leadership positions. The second piece that I would just share is how we guide the next generation on certain career fields that they need to get into. My academic background is more on political science and public administration and emergency management. I did not see a pretty good representation in the Asian American community in political science, for example. A lot of people are in IT, in math, in science, and all these other very technical career fields. Just look at the universities in the academic community. Many of the students in the AAPI communities are not in nonprofit management. They're not in political science or public administration. These are the career fields that lend for real transformational changes in the communities by leading, government programs or being a statesman, being an advocate, being an activist. And so there's a level of even inequity in representation, even in the academic community, in terms of our communities in those career fields. And I would just say my own personal journey in the federal government. Repositioning is so important. Being able to coach and mentor, being able to don't sit in the, if you're invited, it's one thing to be invited to the table, but it's another where you sit at that table. Some of us have a tendency to sit in the back. Be at the table. Show up. Don't be, English is my second language, as you can tell I have accent. There was a time when I used to be so embarrassed about my accent, and I wouldn't speak up. I wouldn't, voice out what I think about the programs or where it needs to go. Sometimes, depending on administrations, work environment could be a little different. Certain priorities may lend to more open dialogue regarding where we have some unserved or underserved communities. Certain administrations, you have to reframe your language, right? Like in the last administration, there was a big piece on public-private partnership. And so I had to find a way, even myself, to translate information in a way that gets to the administration's agenda, but, use language that still represents who we are and what we do, and being able to fairly deliver programs and services that meet people where they're at. I work for the Department of Agriculture, your SBA. We have programs that don't necessarily have to have like the business size standards. We also have programs that can work with non-regulated lenders. And that is so cool. It's one of the many things that is so awesome about the Department of Agriculture. When you think of USDA, don't just think about farming. Think of USDA as essentially your core department in the federal government that enables each one of us to have access to healthy food, and that includes culturally appropriate food. Asian Americans have a particular and different diet than other communities across the country. So think about that. That in of itself is food equity and health equity. The other piece about USDA that I'm so proud about, and I try to voice out some of the uniqueness of our community, is it's not just language barrier, we also have geographic barriers. She mentioned rural as one of the issues that you're passionate about. Geographic barrier is real. You're talking about, a lot of us in the federal government in DC, we tend to schedule our meetings like East Coast time. Guess what? That means we're creating geographic and time zone barriers for Native Hawaiians, for Guam, for Californians, and so those unintended unconscious bias sometimes create those barriers for people that need help the most. And so at least in my career journey, I did my best to, be the one of the many voices, just like what you're doing in SBA, at least at USDA, show up at those tables, sit in the right place, be diplomatic and approach it with a sense of humility, but at least create, a bold, outspoken, representation of the communities you're trying to represent, not just the AAPI, but broadly unserved and underserved communities, and try to steer programs. This is my job right now. Is try to design programs up front that doesn't create inequities for all the communities we're trying to serve, including upholding civil rights. And I'll just say this, lastly, at USDA, one of the many things that I'm doing is the Support for Equity Commission, which is historic in USDA, is creating the power for the sharing the power with stakeholder groups to drive policy recommendations so that our secretary can be mindful of stakeholder input in the way we advance equity internally and externally. And when I say internally, that means also figuring out a way to increase leadership representation in the way we drive and deliver our programs. And then also programmatically, I'm involved in some of the regulatory processes, how we drive budget conversations, how we ensure we're integrating civil rights in a very meaningful way, and also including our trust and treaty responsibilities with Indian tribes. So with that, that's my own personal journey. So thank you. That's the tough love in the beginning, and hopefully I'm sharing the love in the end.
Thank you, Claudette. I had a conversation last night with a new network, and he mentioned that civil rights movement was not just about the African Americans. It was about all minorities. And what we have to decide to do is how to act on some of the deficiencies or inequities that's evident in the Asian American communities, and not only make it known, but do something about it, and doing it right now. So thank you for your participation. I'd like to pose this question to Peter. I know you wear multiple hats as a federal employee, but also as the president of the Federal Asian Pacific Coalition. As we all know, relationship building and the importance of strong relationship really gets us somewhere. Some people say it's about who you know, but also about who knows you. Now, do you think this principle can be used to strengthening relationship with non-Asian communities to build solidarity and address systemic racism in America?
Yes, most definitely. And this particular question is actually not by design. It's just, coincidentally, really, I guess, integrating into what's been discussed so far by this panel and the previous panel. So let me try to tie that all together. So first I want to address about the who you know versus who know you. So, of course, one of my speech I usually give to the mentees I have, to the younger generation is, it doesn't really matter that we all have our social media where we might have thousands of Facebook friends and tweets and LinkedIn and all that. It's really about, okay, great, Peter and Nguyen have 3,000 Facebook friends, but do all those 3,000 or maybe a 1% know Peter? That's the key thing, is that who knows you and remember you. So how I tie that is that that's a very important factor, so don't concentrate on the quantity, how many people know you, but concentrate on the quality of how many people you know, but how many people know you. So with let me claim the job as a president for FAPACC first, and how I tie it to the federal government, and also to extend what Jen and Claudette was saying, and also Sebastian was saying earlier. So FAPACC, like I mentioned before, our mission, we've been around for 35 years, and our mission is really about diversity and inclusion and equity, but it's also about bringing leadership, about promoting education at the high level. So our membership is pretty much from GS5 all the way up to the SES level. And the way we carry the message of how to promote our mission and goal to all our members and also to the non-members. Anyone can participate in FAPACC's activity. Every once of the month we have what we call First Friday Seminar, where we have education pretty much for free that anyone can sign up. The email blasts go out to several thousand people all across the nation. But also, we have the flagship program that happens to be next week, the National Leadership Training Program, that's actually 3 days full. This year's is, unfortunately, is virtual, but next year is going to be back to live and hybrid. The good thing about that is that the whole national NLTP, we call it, is packed full of workshop, plenary speakers, and also it's networking. Allow the people to get to know the people that we have on our list of esteemed speakers. So let me give you an example, just coincidentally. This is the first year we're actually talking about SBA, because I think that's the highlight of today's town hall. Not that we have Jen. It's going to be one of my speakers. She already did the video for me. Thank you, that. We actually have two more executives with SBA. One of them is Sherry Thomas. She, I believe, the Director of Diversity, Inclusion, Equity. She's going to speak for us is either Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday ceremonies. But also importantly, we also have Director Isabel Guzman, the administrator for SBA. She's going to be there too, to be one of the keynote speakers. 3 SBA executives in one setting. And just to carry on the USDA, I actually, in my hand, I have a keynote speak from Secretary Tom Vesak from USDA, another good friend of ours. So that's what nonprofit organization like FAPAC gave our members, is that, I can work for the FAA, DOT for 30-plus years, and some other federal employee, but I probably would never get to see my administrator or the secretary. It depends on where you're at, especially if you're out of the field. But by joining a club, an organization like FAPAC, you actually, if you happen to be live, you actually get to shake hands with your administrator, your secretary, cabinet level. And not just Tom and Isabel. We also have 3 other cabinet level secretaries going to join us this year. I mean, thank you for the virtual. It's just great. I mean, be able to put all these cabinet level secretaries successful to this president be in one place and be able to carry their message. And mostly, of course, it's about diversity and inclusion to everyone. And that's not just to members of FAPAC, but across to nationwide, to all the federal government employees, to the Department of Defense and D.C. government. So that's a powerful message I carry. So that's the thing about who do you know versus who know you. So just the privilege of me to be a member of FAPAC and just happen to be on the National Board of Directors, just like my other 4 VPs and executives, they get to have on the first-hand name with these executives. And they remember you start developing a relationship that lifetime. The other thing I think Claudette also mentioned about the mentoring, we, by belong to FAPAC, we also have a mentoring program. We call it CDP, Center Development Program, that anyone can join, and we assign a mentor, usually at an executive level, to a mentee, and it's a 9-month program, allowing them to promote. So we have pretty successful rate in terms of those people joining and be able to come up the ranking. Why is that important? Well, Claudette mentioned that too, and I think Jen facing that during her career. I too, back then, sometimes, now I wish I get caught. I get caught for going and buy something that had to be 21, so they caught me. But then I wonder, do you caught me because I just look young, because you think I'm Asian, or because they just try to be discriminated? I don't know. But now I wish I get caught all the time. That's no longer. But that's that unconscious, I guess, discrimination that we might not be aware of. But also more important is that for the federal employees like us and in the management chain, I pay attention to the thing called MD 715. Mm-hmm. It basically dissects every detail, the grade level, the technical or professional skill of all level, and of course, like Claudette said, we like barely over 2%, when the national average is 6%. Yeah. But guess what? Yep. It's actually got worse than that. So this is May Heritage Month. It's not just about Asian American, but Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander. That's the key thing. Our focus for FAPAC this year is Pacific Islander. If you look at the MD 715 report, forget about the Asian, the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Korean. We're pretty up there. But when you get down to the Native Hawaiian, the Pacific Islander, they are like 0.0 or something. And let's break it down further. Mostly prominently male Vietnamese, male Chinese, but let's break down to the woman. That gets smaller, so that's pretty bad. And I'm not talking at the technical field where GS level. I'm talking the higher you go up to the senior management, it gets pretty slim. So let me echo more what Claudette and Jen were saying. So it's all about, you want to have a seat at the table. Yes, that's part of the reason why I joined the senior management rank, because one of the questions when I got selected for this job about 15 years, I said, why would I want to be a manager? Already up there, got the good money. Why do I want all this headache and stress and deal with people, because that's tough. Well, my manager at times is happy of African American female struggling through all this same issue, went to the SES program and didn't get selected, probably because of discrimination. They say, well, you gotta be doing this to get that seat at the table. You gotta be able to have a voice, and you gotta be help and serve the purpose. If not, someone else will do it, and it might be worse. And really, that's the main reason. It's not about the money. It's not about the title. What you can do. So, like Jen, like Claudette, me, and several other management, especially at the senior level in the federal government, representing API, we just don't just talk. We put action to place. My employees are very diverse. It's a mix of every possible scenario you can come up with. I try, the law encouraged me, to promote this diversity. So I have no problem of, if the selecting panel give me 3 potential candidates, one of them, of course, have to be a Caucasian American, one of them have to be African American or so on, one of them another ethnic. I would look at, all right, they're all qualified. Doesn't really matter which one Peter picked. They're all highly qualified, but let's make sure we serve and we take care of the business, the requirement, the underserved. So that's why we have an opportunity. I have an opportunity to hire those kind of people because I have the seat at the table, not become the menu kind of thing. And the other things, how we, and that's helped because, we carry the message, we carry the voice. You just need more of us. Even in our setting, we don't have enough, compared to everyone else. So let me tie that to the last panel about small business. So, of course, not as a hiring manager, but also, we all have a budget because we all have needs, whether IT needs or support services and all that stuff. So the law also allowed me and actually encouraged me and promote me and push me as a manager to do better job, make sure I give a portion of this funding to, not to all large business, but to small business, maybe to disabled vet, maybe to minority, disabled woman-owned. So that's my concentration. All the, basically all the contract I was given to for the past 15 years, all small business, and I stay small business. But the other, and as you heard from Domay and others, it's a problem. So we have several vehicles within FAA that promote that, but unfortunately the problem is that there's just too many small business or woman-owned or 8A, and they end up kind of compete against each other. So one of the conversations I just had with Domay earlier is this: this pie thing of money that the federal government gave for contractor is huge. Quarter of that probably mandated to set aside for small business. We all know that. So between that, all the small business don't fight among each other. I think we probably spend more time fighting, but maybe there's some sort of consortium needed from all the CEOs of small business and decide, because I believe every small business company have a specialty. And if you can sit down and say, okay, I'll take care of this piece and you take care of that, and work together as a team, because I think all contracts have promoting partnership and self-employment, and then you can vice versa. But yeah, of course, one of my good friend that owns a very large small business company say that, don't ever become a sub, always become a prime. Well, you can't have all the prime. Somebody got to help be a supper partner. So that's the key thing. But that's how I also, by leveraging my networking, my knowledge with FAPAC, and as a federal government manager, allow me to do that, to extend that, and not just talk. And that's what important. The other thing I think Shina mentioned, and I'm glad he's here, not because from a movie star perspective, but from using his powerful connection from a social media connection. I'm not I'm from the, I guess, baby boomer generation, and I have a couple of teenagers, 14 and 18. I'm actually not too worried about them in terms of the whole diversity. But I mean, I can see that they can still see some of the discrimination. But with their newer generation and with the social media, and of course we need to help them mentoring and help push that message out. They don't see that as much as we do, but we have to promote it. We have to be the champion to help them with that because that's our future. One of the things I always say is this, so of course both of my kids are 100% American citizens, born and raised here. I mean, it's just they're not but about it. I have to work harder just like all the other parents, try to get them to have some, like, you are actually, Vietnamese American, so remember the Vietnamese part before the American or Chinese American and so on. But they pretty much not American. They can become a president of the United States. That's something very important to remember. So we need to give them all the opportunities to get there. And I agree that this is no longer the IT stuff. Most of us back then, we all like either engineering or doctor, that's it. But now they're more concentrated on politician, and that's good. I think we do have a great future come ahead.
Thank you, Peter. We're going to expand this conversation on relationship building. I think as Asians, we're really good at becoming friends one-on-one, behind the doors, or going to places on a private level. We fail. We get an F for civic engagement and community engagement. And I would love to hear from you, Susan, the importance of these type of engagement that we're not so used to doing back in our home countries. But there's a lot of work to be done. I know Susan has tremendous experience in this. You can share a little bit about empowering our audience and also the Asian American communities, the importance of community engagement and civic engagement.
Our job at the USPAACC American Chamber of Commerce and my work is all about relationship. You talk about not who you know, but who knows you, who notices you, who mention you, who will acknowledge you when you walk into a room, who will talk about you and refer people to you. That's the essence of relationship. And in order for you to, and that takes you a long way down the road to success, prosperity, prominence, and do things that you want to do. I said earlier that I became a lawyer, and I was a very good lawyer, but that prepared me for the job that I do. And I was born for this, I think. The U.S. Pan-Asian Chamber of Commerce is all about business, helping people to create wealth. Because when you bring wealth into your family, when you can pay your bills, write your own checks. Am I not resonating? No, I'm not creating any feedback. Okay. Oh, I scared myself. Shall I start all over again? God, that was great. All right, I'm just joking. I think if you take this is not very good, but it's good for us, at least for myself. In China, there's this philosopher, Confucius. He said, take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of your street, take care of your town, take care of your province, and take care of the country, and take care of the world. You've got to take care of what you have within your house first. And don't be the guy, the gal, who just keep inside of your house and keep warm, have your food, and don't worry about your neighbor who has a hole in his roof during the winter time. That's how relationship is built at USPAACC. What we do is look at those who are in need and help them grow the relationship. We connect people with each other. There's so many things you've said, Claudette and Peter, that I wanted to chime in, but ultimately, we know as an Asian American community, we're the smallest of the small. We are only, a few notches above the Native Americans in population, but we are the fastest growing, and I am speaking in faith-safe company here. Many people do not want me to say that. We're the fastest growing. We are. They don't want us to say that. And when I say to people that the Chinese helped to build the transcontinental railroad that connected America's east to the west and started the transcontinental commerce, people don't want me to say that. But they would say, We build a country. And you come and tell us that you build a transcontinental, so we got to be very careful in what we say about ourselves. Yes, we want to be confident. We want to talk about our contribution. But now I learn when I want to create and maintain the relationship, I always bring other in. I always say, like other Americans, we contribute to the wealth, prosperity, and advancement, being the leader of the free world. Stop that first. Okay? And then they will not say, so you're good? Why are you in this room? I have had that reception before. You are Asian American, you got 2 law degrees, you got this, you got a house, you got a car, your children are in private school. I stopped doing those things. Live very modestly, as I said, I pick up the piece of paper, the trash on the floor myself. Years ago, when I realized that we are the smallest of the among Asian American business organizations, I began to reach out. Spanish Chamber of Commerce, 20 years ago, the USDA Chamber of Commerce, and the Native American Chamber of Commerce, NEBA, Native American Business Association, 20 years ago. And then 15 years ago, the LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce brought a guest over to my, welcomed him. He became the co-founder of the National LGBT Chamber. 12 years ago, when President Obama came into town, the U.S. Black Chambers came, and President Ron Busby moved in from Phoenix and started the U.S. Black Chambers. And I sat on the FISA Small Business Advisory Council with him. I welcomed him with my the disability in the veteran organization. So over these years, I can always say, I'm the first one to reach out. And they said, why did you do that? I said, I know I'm the smallest one. I better go make friends. I don't want to be bullied. Besides, with the African American, I tell them, we learn civil rights from you. We stand on your shoulders on all the work you've done, and you know how to organize. You get all the rhetoric right. We're going to learn from you. The Hispanics, I tell them, I know you can always say you have the biggest number. You have beautiful music. You women with long legs. Okay? You're a beautiful figure. We don't have it. We just look at you and admire you. But you know what? We have a big brain, and we have a big heart, and we work hard out for the cause that we can share for good. That's the basis of our relationship building. And we always go out and network. What Asians are not good at has been, they're getting better now. This panel and this group demonstrated is, we never go out there and say, yeah, I did that. You like it? Thank you. Oh, no, not me. No, not me. I don't want to get, you go. So for a long time, I have been the voice of the Asian American business because nobody want to talk about it. Talking about meaning complaining. They don't want to go complain. Susan, you go. You're the lawyer. You can always talk about the problems in our community. With Claudette here, I'm so glad that you're the voice at agriculture. There's so much we can do. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is mainstream now. And in my organization, that's what we do. And I could tell you a lot from the business perspective. In diversity, in minority business contracting, we're still looked at as, why are you here? Okay, why you already have a high education. You told us that? That's our fault. We have the highest educated group in the country. Oh my God, now they're using that against us. Okay? Your family more intact together. Why are you here? We're broken families. And all that, I find the currency coming at the hit me now. So you shouldn't be at this table. You shouldn't be talking about Asian Americans. You are already okay. So now what I want to tell them is that you're only talking to us at the top 10 to 15% of the Asian American population who are educated. Many of them actually come from overseas, brought with them the education, the bag full of money, and start their own business and be able to maintain a good life. But there are the bottom 10.3%, the Hmongs, the Vietnamese, who are still not quite mainstream, the Laotians and Cambodians. They are, and now the Nepalese, the Thais, the Pakistanis. I'm working with them through the Community Navigator program in Long Beach, California, in even big cities where nobody ever noticed them. So we always have to do that. And some of the older generations say, oh, no, you don't Don't wave your dirty laundry. Don't let them know that we have all these poor and underserved people. Because if you don't do that, they will always pull us apart. You talk about data. Those data segregation is important, but I don't think we should put it be the center there. We can say it, but don't say so much as say, okay, here's the money, go do your data, and they go do their own thing. My job with corporate America and the government, federal contracting, is that, where's the money? Where are the deals? What are the qualification requirements? Where's the door? I'm leading my delegation in there. I'm leading the Asian American there, and you have a lot of 8A companies, small women-owned businesses. Let us go in and compete. Let them compete. Yes, there are lots of small businesses in the 8A program. They're losing a lot of them. You need to build them up. Guzman had told me. We discussed the loss of 8A companies, and you need to increase the role. But increasing them does not help unless you give them the opportunity. But if the opportunities are always favor one particular group, my member is going to say, Susan, you tell me to get certified. I took off my clothes and let you measure me, that I am who I am. Okay? I am an Asian American. I'm a citizen. This is all my money that I put in the bank. I took my children's college funds to start this business. Okay? I slept underneath the conference table to work overnight. My wife went home and started a business to pay the bills. Where's my contract? I see my competitor given the contract. I know I'm better qualified. I have the experience and I have a track record of the past performance, not within the federal government, which they want me to have. I have it in the private sector, but why was I not paid? So I see a lot of these issues, problems. That's why I said earlier with the telecommunication or the internet infrastructure bill, the IIJA, that give us $42.25 billion to serve the underserved community. I want to make sure that the minority and underserved business owner will get a piece of that action, whether they get to train, mentor, educate the folks who will otherwise not be able to get into the door and learn what these $42.25 billion will be used. Construction workers, transportation workers, IT, professional staffing, augmentation. Don't tell them, let them tell you that there are too many Asian Americans in staff augmentation. Projects, people with innovation, bring them in. You talk about your conference. My conference is coming in 19 days, exactly. Right here in Washington, D.C. Guzman the administrator is going to be there. You'll be there? That's right. That's right. And then the Mark Madrid, the whole CNPP group is going to be there. The FCC, the NTIA woman who is in charge of the deployment of the $65 billion of infrastructure work for building up the internet will be there. And we're going to get the OMB, Office of Management Budget people there. We've got the GSE people there and tell us what are the regulations that have been changed that affect the small and minority, or I always want to say Asian, Black, Hispanic, Native American, in order of alphabetical. Okay. My good friend Ron Busby, president of U.S. Black Chamber, he said, I'm not a minority. Look at me. I'm black. I said, that's right. I'm not a minority. Look at me, I'm Asian. I think we should begin to talk about us that way, particularly those underserved, okay? Otherwise, you become invisible. They brush over you, walk by you. Who are you? You're Asian? You don't look like it. You're minority? Maybe you are. So networking is important. Be there. Don't be when you go to the reception, don't be the one cocktail shrimp attendee. You know what that is? They joke about us. This Asian guy, they always say, girls are more sociable, right? He walks into the reception, he goes to the bar, get a drink, usually a soda with a lime, and he goes to the cocktail table, get a shrimp cocktail, eat it, but look around, he leaves his drinks on the table, he walks away. He does not socialize. He's not good at that. We need to get our community to be good at socializing, have what I call an elevator pitch. 30 seconds. If you run into the Pope, if you're Catholic, in the elevator, what are you going to say? Be ready for that, okay? And be ready for a 1-minute pitch, about yourself, about your business. I'm sure you hear about it, but people hear about this, but they do not practice it. Always look the best, because people judge you by how you look, and have the first word that comes out of your mouth impressive. People judge you by how you look, how you walk, and how you speak. And read widely, because that helps you with your networking. Whatever people say, you know something about it, rather become tongue-tied. Whether you're talking with the chief procurement officers of Fortune 50 companies, which we do frequently, we yearn to have that opportunity, but when the opportunity comes our way, we got to be ready. Already. So networking, important. Get ourselves ready. Somebody said that you got to be ready yourself. If you're not ready, you lose that opportunity. Yeah. You know, one joke. Years ago, at the YWCA, they honored Betty Ford. I was young. Later, I said, "Oh, Miss Ford, I was a committee that nominated you." She would say, "Excuse me, Susan? You were on a committee that nominated Mrs. Betty Ford as the nominee, honoree of their YWCA's award." The answer was, you should be grateful that I accepted the award. So be careful of what you say, because it would really show how inexperienced you are. Sometimes it's rather cute, but if you're in it for the big time, big game, and somebody sent you out to represent a group, be ready. Like Peter, Claudette, and all of us here. One last thing. In my generation, I'm a baby boomer generation, women who got up there never looked back. They want to be the queen bee. Okay? The queen. That has not helped us. For the white women community, they used to say, "I slept my way up there, why should I help you?" Right? Asian, they did it, I don't know, but they don't look back. We should look back and mentor others, because we should spread the love, spread the wealth, and that will be our legacy.
I feel like do this even more so. Well, thank you for your great wisdom. I feel so tremendously honored to have moderated this panel. I would like everyone's attention here in the front. These are influencers in their rightful education, professional track record. They're here that they have a voice at the table, and they could really do some either damage or good for our communities. What it means is, we touched upon relationship building, we touched upon community engagement, she even touched upon, the actual wisdom as to how to do. What's incredibly noticeable is that we as an Asian community haven't really understood our true identity. And we either have been misunderrepresented or miscommunicated, miseducated, and sitting at the chair that we're sitting on. But it's time to kind of reflect. And I think it's really important that the next generation does not experience something of unqualified information, but rather us being able to implant a dream or impart a dream that could really help them to transcend to the next generation. We need to help our youngsters. And one of the reasons why I personally took great passion in moderating this panel, of course, also being part of launching the Chime TV, which is going to be the Asian-owned TV channel that has never been in the history of American media, is because I do not want my 12-year-old daughter to experience some of the things that we've talked about today, and it should never be repeating, but rather having a wonderful, purposeful life, where if she desires and she's equipped, she's able to do it. And so I want to thank all the panelists today. Thank you for making the time to be here and share your great journey and your wisdom. And I'm sure every single one of us here, if you feel like I don't really do civic engagement or community engagement, you're already doing it by being present today. But I do encourage you, please, share your vote, share your voice, Go to CPUC, or I say California, but go to PUC, public hearing. Go to corporate mergers and acquisition, public hearing, common places where your voice can be heard, and they're not too big for you. Your voice matters. And so I would strongly encourage all the participants who've come, audiences, please rethink how you can be part of the future solution. Thank you very much for being with us today.